But anyway, we moved back here end of July 2001. Our daughter was 2 weeks old. I drove back. Libby had to wait for Hayla to be 2 weeks old to fly with her. So she flew back. And when we moved here, none of this stuff was here. There was a little old green shed here, the 599 building it was called. It actually had an address on it because it was somebody's old camp that Grandpa brought here. And so I had a spine injury in January 2008. I broke my lower spine and ended up on disability. And to avoid becoming paralyzed or not being able to be mobile, I just kept adding things out here to keep me busy and to get me out. And I knew moving around was going to be what I needed to do to maintain my physical abilities. And so we just kept adding stuff. And, over the years, I mean, we've been working on this system now for almost 20 years.
How many acres do you have here?
So there's 6.5 acres total. And we utilize probably less than 2 acres total for everything we do.
Nice.
So it's an intensive permaculture system. The three main criteria of permaculture: it's good for the earth, it's good for the people and animals, and then anything in excess goes back into a system. And and part of that, the good for the people part is beautification too. So we've got some rose bushes and flowers and a fruit tree mixed in there. There's my cat getting into the catnip now. Yeah.
But when were you like, we should turn this into an LLC?
Yep. So, I started selling some eggs. Like we started with 25 chickens. Then I'm like, well, maybe I should get 50 chickens. And then I realized how easy it was to just move eggs. And like everybody's like, hey, you have any more eggs? And I'm like, yeah, I've got eggs. And then pretty soon I'm like, well, if I got 75 chickens or 100, maybe I could start selling to the co-op or whatever. So I did that and started selling, to them. And then the Department of Ag changed all their licensing stuff, and we had to figure that out. But I was like, well, chickens are giving you a revenue generator every day. Once they start laying. I mean, you have a 16-week, give or take, period of feeding them, and you don't get anything in return. But once you have your first flock and they're laying eggs, then you rotate. Like I get young chickens in April. My older chickens will lay until my younger chickens start laying. Then late fall, I'll harvest my older chickens. One of the big things that I utilize in my permaculture system, and it's a big thing in permaculture in general, is Hugo Culture.
Yes.
And this was our first Hugo Mound ever. That one's probably 8 years old now. And they're intended primarily for perennial stuff, but we do a lot of annual stuff on our Hugo Mounds as well. There's an apple tree on top of this one, and then.
How old is this one?
I think I want to say that one's 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
And then we built, I think this was the second one here. So now we've got like some willow bark on there and some rhubarb. And then we do a lot of little mini hugel stuff too. And like that one is always annual. Delicata squash was one of the things we grew over that one last year. We try to move everything around. But the way this system is kind of set up is, it's like a big circle. First the brooder was in there, then they'd move out to here, and then once they were done in this area and they got big enough, I'd move them over here. So it was kind of symbolic of the chickens moving around, was symbolic of the manure.
Okay.
Because the manure would start here and then it would go out to the compost piles and then it would all eventually come back.
Okay.
Right? So it was like a big circle of the poop would start there, it'd go out, it'd get composted, and then it'd all come back and it would amend all these areas. So everywhere you see stuff growing here is all soil that's been produced using the animal manure from our animals with zero outside inputs other than wood chips. Like I have tree companies bring me wood chips.
Yeah.
So this is a 100-foot Hugo Mound here, and this is all perennial stuff. I can't tell you what most of this stuff is here for sure. That's another one of Libby's babies, but I do know this one is, we moved all of our blackberry plants over here, and then we put fresh new asparagus plants in here last year. So this is year one on the asparagus. And then, you just let them go. Don't harvest it, so it goes to the roots and get established. And that's all stinging nettle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I haven't done anything with it yet because my compost recipe requires 30% green matter.
Nitrogen.
So I'll harvest all of this, like I'm gonna get some long sleeves and gloves, and I'll harvest all of the stinging nettle as my green material
Okay.
and comfrey,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll put that in, and then 10% nitrogen from my animals, 60% brown material in the form of wood chips and whatever. The hope is you end up with a fungal dominant compost, which is what you're after,
Okay.
you know, versus a bacteria dominant. You want bacteria in there because some of the beneficial microbiology feeds on the bacteria, and then you end up with what could be a biocomplete compost. You have everything you need in your soil to create healthy plants and to maintain proper management of pests and disease and all of the things that you want to avoid. Because some pest presence is necessary to keep your beneficials around, right? It's not about eradication, it's about balance and management. And so I've been learning a lot about that over the last couple of years with the help of some friends. So they bring their microscopes over here, and we get some compost samples and take samples off the Hugo Mounds and inside the greenhouses, and we look at them under microscopes and try to analyze the microbiology to see what's present. Because what we've essentially done here over the years of building this system and dialing it in and fine tuning things is we've created this pretty incredible ecosystem now to where I'm seeing animals in life come back.
Yeah.
Like I didn't see salamanders here for over 15 years.
Really?
Now I'm seeing salamanders, like tons of different varieties of frogs and toads and snakes and bugs and beneficial pollinators and butterflies and birds. I mean, just the amount of life that we see here now compared to the time before we started doing all this.
With the very minimal studying that I've done and learned, that's something that's very telltale to a very good permaculture setup.
Yep.
After a few years, all of a sudden it's like, I could take my hands off of this and it's doing its thing.
Yeah, like Hugo Culture, for example, once these mounds are saturated, because I have big logs in my mounds, like I build them big with big carbon in there on purpose so that they'll continue to break down and compost and feed whatever's on them for 20 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So the management part of it is weeding and watering if you need to.
Yeah.
And that's about it. I mean, but when I'm out here daily doing stuff, like when I walk out the door in the morning, my hope is that I'm paying attention enough to where I'm going to learn something new again or notice something that maybe could use improvement or altering of some sort to make it better. I mean, there's never perfection. There's always improvements that
Now
can be
you're
made.
perfecting the listening part of
Right,
it all.
like if I pay enough attention, the plants and the animals and the ecosystem itself that we've created here is going to teach me or tell me,
Yes.
like, hey, this isn't working, or this is working really good, really well, not really good. I'm better at English than that. This was a mound that I built over a year ago. This is a 30-footer, and this one was built with this chicken bone. This one was built with a pile of compost that I made from one of our longest living sheep here. His name was Leo. He was a Cormo, which is a cross between a Corriedale and a Superfine Merino. And he died of natural causes. He was 10, and he was big. He was like 160 pounds. So I took his sheepskin and I sent it off for tanning, and then I composted him whole in a pile. And then in the spring, I took his pile of compost after managing it and turning it and all that stuff. I built this pile out of him, and so he could continue giving back to the farm for several years to come. So it's part of the whole. Everything goes back into the system, right? Like there is no. I do 0% or 100% use, like zero waste animal harvest. Nothing gets wasted ever. Everything gets used, whether it's the soil eating it, us eating it, the chickens eating it, the dogs eating it, critters, whatever, biology eating it. And there's something about the sheep and the sheep manure that brings the fungal dominance of the soil that you want. Like this pile, if it rains, will explode with mushrooms.
Oh, okay.
It's crazy, like hundreds of mushrooms.
What do you do with them?
I just let them go back into the soil. They're not edible ones.
Right.
I just leave them. Like I don't like to disturb the mycelial colonies that have been created through the composting process, and So I just leave them
Just
because,
enjoy them.
yeah, I mean, they're beautiful, but then I also look at it as, okay, it's working,
Right.
you know, because if that fungal growth is so abundant, then that soil is really healthy,
Yeah.
you know. We've got all this builder board, it's called, from doing this house remodel.
Yeah.
So it's like rolls of cardboard that you put on your wood floor so that it doesn't get messed up by contractors or your family walking in there. But I saved it all when I pulled it up. So I'm going to put all that builder board cardboard down over here,
Oh.
smother all these the volunteer raspberries that keep spreading,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm bringing wood chips. I'll show you my wood chip pile. It's enormous.
I'm gonna be
But
jealous.
we're going to cover all of this with wood chips
Mm-hmm.
because in that wood chip area there, I inoculated that area with wine cap mushroom fungus.
Oh, cool.
So the hope is that they'll fruit this year, and I want them to just keep spreading through the wood chips.
And the big thing that's really cool about this to me is like wine cap mushrooms. Just because you felt like it, there's no big revenue generating thing going on in the back of your mind. This is all exploratory gardening and nature and permaculture all
Yeah,
together.
yeah. It's just it's something that'll improve the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something. I mean, whenever I do something out here, it's primarily to make this whole thing better. It's not. It's never about money.
Right.
Like the only thing that has to be about money is the eggs because that's what generates the revenue to financially sustain the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so anything out here is done because it's going to be beneficial to the system, beneficial to the soil, beneficial to the earth, beneficial to the animals, beneficial to everything around. And and the other thing is if things do happen to be abundant or things explode and there's a ton of wine caps,
Mm-hmm.
we look at those things as barter material.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I can have people come and help with something and I can send them home with wine cap mushrooms and eggs and maybe a couple broiler chickens or whatever. I look at everything, all the things that we produce here is the money, right? It's not about me taking
That
it
is the
to a
end
market.
game.
That is it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to have to truck a bunch of things to the farmer's market.
Right.
Like, we've dialed it down to now I just sell eggs.
Yeah.
And
On purpose.
Libby brings her wool stuff when she comes, you know. So we're growing money.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I see it.
Yeah.
It's a circle of life. Like I feel like I've created a circle of life here that sustains us, and it's a circle of life that sustains my animals, and a circle of life that sustains a whole bunch of critters that live on our property now. Yeah, so I've tried to. Like it's taken a long time to get it to the point that it's at. So I just built these two piles about a week ago.
Dang.
You know, this one's sitting at about 150 degrees
You should
now.
check.
How can we possibly be sustaining ourselves in a sustainable manner if you don't have animal inputs?
Yeah.
Like I have animals here. I have the ability to breed animals. I have the ability to continue producing meat, wool, broth, manure, soil, eggs. Like I can keep producing all these things here without bringing any outside input.
Yeah.
Other than, you know, if I had a rooster die or something, maybe I'd have to order more chicks.
Right.
All of my animals are multi-use.
Yep.
Like none of them are pets, none of them. My intention whenever I get animals is to use them to their fullest, and that also means harvesting them and using them for food. And then everything from there, like feathers from my chickens, get brought out here into the compost, so I have feather meal. I capture all the blood from my animal harvests. It goes into my compost. I have blood meal. Any of the bones that don't get used for broth, or if they do get used for broth, I bring them out here and they go in my compost or into my animal pens until they pick everything off of them. Then they go in my compost and I have bone meal. You know, I don't bring any of that stuff in from the outside.
So when that time comes for the transition, you look at what you need most and what this specific project could benefit your farm the most.
Yep.
And then you kind
and
of,
it's
each situation is.
and it's not even always about what we need the most. It's about what is going to be the best use or the best thing for this animal. You know, yeah, that's like harvesting. When I harvest animals, for example, like it took me a long time to get to a point where I was mentally comfortable with the fact that I was going to be shooting a pig or cutting the throat of a sheep, and the way that I was able to sort of navigate all of that was I finally clicked one day, like, this isn't about me. it's about the animal. So I need to get over my emotions. It's not about if I'm sad or if I don't want to do it. It's about how can I do this and make it the best end of life for the animal.
Yeah.
Because my belief is that the death should be every bit as good as the life. And if it's not, we've failed that animal. Like I tell everybody, the first two ingredients in the meat that we produce and eat here is love and compassion.
Yeah.
Like you'll see when we walk over there, you know, my pigs, like my two Idaho pasture pigs, they'll, like if I crouch down, they'll come up and like sit on my lap, you know, and they want scratchings and stuff. Like that's our first interactions of the day is attention, you know. So anyway, those piles back there that we were just at, that's the life of the farm pretty much, you know. I can't supply the demand that I have when I sell compost. Like I have people right now waiting for dump trailer loads, and I'm like, well, it's going to be a couple more weeks because I'm not going to sell you something that's not ready,
Right.
and I won't sell anybody anything if I don't know that it's the best that I could make it.
Right.
You know, I don't believe in using the words good and enough together, because if it's only good enough, you didn't give it your best, right? Like I always told my kids growing up, I said, strive for perfection, settle for your best, and it's always going to be better than good enough. You know?
like that.
Because good enough is not good. I have to do this because I have these little lambs that keep sneaking out.
They figured
And I'll come out here and they're out here running around, and then the dogs will chase them and they jump back through the gate. Yep, so these are mostly, well, I shouldn't say mostly, like it's become a half and half flock now. But these little black and white ones, they're called a Jacob sheep. This is Maryland Merino instead of Maryland Monroe. Yeah, this lady in town, Maryland, she's got a whole bunch of Libby's clothes, but look at how gorgeous that is.
Wow.
Hey, what's that? What's that piece of plastic from, you guys? You guys have already eaten dinner. You have. Yeah, so these are two red Waddle Pigs, and the black guy is a...
Waddle?
These two are red Waddle. I think they're actually a cross. This fence is electric, just so you know.
Okay.
And this guy's a mule foot. He's a boar. He's still intact. He likes his back scratchings. But he's
got like wire. That is
yeah,
wire.
it's
You could
super,
sew with that.
super coarse. And he's a big baby. You know. Yeah, and the other two not so much. Like they'll let me pet them, but they're more standoffish. Nope. You know, and this guy's a boar. You know, most people are like, oh, you gotta be careful with boars, you know, because he's, come here, can I see your tooth?
How old is he?
He's 2. I started hosting field trips with kids. It started with a preschool group in town, Discovery Central. And, you know, my mindset was, you know, if I can get 30 kids down here and I can influence one of those kids or inspire one of those kids to want to be a farmer or to at least grow some food, then that's success to me, you know. And one of the things I've learned over the years is it's really hard to get adults to change their mind or their habits. And I could have field trips of adults come here and none of them would ever go home and grow food. But if I can get their kids excited and their kids go home excited and say, hey mom, hey dad, can we grow some food or can we get some chickens? Then their parents are paying attention, right?
That's a seed planted.
Yeah, it is, literally. And so now when I'm at the farmer's market, I have kids come up all the time, hey, Farmer Randy, you know, and telling me about their chickens or their garden and stuff. And their parents are telling me, how, like, oh yeah, now we're doing this and doing that. And some of them actually come and get compost from me now. And,
Yeah.
so yeah, to influence the kids and even just to teach them a little bit more about real food. And
What's the importance of educating food sustainability?
well, along with food sustainability comes environmental sustainability. Like there's all, you know, if you think of all the aspects of permaculture, we're not just doing it for food. We're doing it for a multitude of reasons. And, you know, it's for our health, for the health of the planet, the health of the water, the health of the animals, you know, everything. I mean, so if we're not teaching our younger generations to carry on some of these sustainability practices, you know, what's it going to be like for my grandkids?
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those things where we've kind of lost the whole tradition of passing down things from generation to generation, right? if we all learn it and we keep passing it on, eventually there's going to be a whole bunch of little farms like this, and our planet's going to regain its health. And then these guys are Idaho pasture pigs. You can see how they have the shorter snout and more of a turned up nose. But these guys they're total sweethearts too. I don't see any reason to have animals, especially animals that are big, if they're not going to be friendly.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
plus I just love animals and I love to interact with them. They deserve to have this kind of life.
Yeah.
You know, and the reality of it is people are always going to eat meat. We're never, ever, ever going to get to a point in the world where everybody becomes a vegan. It's not going to happen. So because it's not going to happen, let's be realistic about how we should raise our animals and have more farms doing this versus industrial agriculture.
Right.
You know, like we don't need factory farmed meat.
Yeah.
If there was a whole bunch of small farms in every community raising some level of meat, I think that we would be in a much better place. And so would the animals. But these guys are like dogs, you know.
Yeah, they are.
These guys were heart stealers when they showed up, man. They were about this big,
Oh man.
and they were the cutest little pigs.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh God, it's going to be so hard to shoot them," you know. And I'm like, you know, every animal I harvest is hard. Like if it ever becomes easy for me, I don't want to do it anymore. Like it shouldn't be easy. It should always be hard.
Still cute.
We produce what we can, and what we can't produce that other people in our community are producing, then we try to support them. Like, you know, in the beginning there was this mindset that we have to produce everything. We have to do everything for ourselves. But then you learn that, you know, not geographically and environmentally speaking, everything's not going to work
Yeah.
in a system.
Right.
So you do what you can do
Supplementing for
well,
each other.
and the things you can't do well that other people are doing, you support them, because that's what really makes a local food system and a local economy work. It's supporting each other too.
Right. Right.
Like it's not about, oh, we can all do everything ourselves.
We all need our own closed structure. It's no, we can have a symbiotic.
Yeah,
partnership.
it's got to be that way. I end up doing this a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I do. I just, if I'm out here doing stuff, all of a sudden I'll just be in here for 15 minutes hanging out with my pigs and petting them, you know. And I wouldn't have it any other way. You know, when I sit down and eat, or when I like pull out a leg of prosciutto that I've cured, like I have 3 legs of prosciutto hanging in my meat room right now that I've been curing for 2 years almost, and it tastes super good, but it tastes even better because of all of this.
Yeah.
You know, like because of the appreciation that I have for it, I know how much I've put into it, not just in the form of organic feed. Like all the feed that these guys get is a super custom feed mix that's free of soy and corn. So now here we are back at this is my older laying flock. That's my olive egg rooster guy out there. We don't have a lawn, but we do have some grassy areas naturally. And we knew we couldn't get rid of them, so I'm like, all right, my chickens don't have pasture because it's a small, intensive permaculture system. So I'm going to buy a lawnmower with a grass catcher and I'm going to bring the pasture to them. So now I cut the grass. It provides this really good source of food for my chickens. And then I take it in there and they go crazy over the grass clippings.
They know what's coming, yeah.
Oh, they do. This is their 3rd wheelbarrow load today.
You can go before me. There's so many things that we, as consumers, we purchase, and something high quality is a big deal to a lot of consumers in certain departments. Maybe if we shifted that to food being what we want to spend high quality on.
One of the things I try to change the perception on with the prices of food is when somebody says, oh my God, that's expensive. And I'm like, no, it's not expensive. What you're used to is food that's super cheap because it's subsidized. So my food's not expensive. It's just that the $1.89 eggs at the grocery store, you've already paid a good portion of the actual cost of them through your taxes. The rest is what you're paying in the $1.89.
Yeah.
So the money that you don't see going to those eggs through your taxes, we don't get subsidies.
Right.
Corporate agriculture does. That's why they can sell eggs for $1.89 or.
And if you saw those chickens.
Right. Yeah. And if you actually did a side-by-side taste test, I'm pretty certain you would taste the difference.
Yeah.
You know, can you like all farms should be. I think one of the most important things I do as a farmer is try to share knowledge and teach people what I've learned from other people or just by doing it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are curious, and just because of the amount of the lacking of knowledge with it, that they fear to even ask sometimes.
Yep.
And being out there and being willing to just be like, I'm just going to tell you everything is a really good way for people to, start following that rabbit hole
Oh yeah.
of interest.
I try to get people to ask questions.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I have on my dry
get the
erase
eggs?
board. Sure. One of the things on my dry erase board at the market is eggs are like people. It's what's on the inside that matters.
I like that.
Trying to get people to be like, what's that mean?
Yeah.
And then it starts these conversations, and then I can share with them all kinds of stuff. Like I just need them to open the door.
Right.
Because once they open the door, I'm just going to keep going. But that's the gist of Shady Grove Farm and the permaculture system. And I know that's a really long-winded farm tour, but
It was wonderful.
that's how we do it, why we do it, and yeah. And I'll do it as long as I can continue walking and breathing.